The night I left the hospital, the air outside tasted like metal and rain. I touched the bandage over my knee and told it we would learn each other's names in the morning. The cab smelled of old coffee and Armor. I watched streetlights pass like slow blinks. 72 years old, and I have learned to sit still in pain without letting it rearrange my face. The driver asked if I needed help up the stairs. I lied and said no. I have always believed in the quiet dignity of my own two hands. But my son met me at the curb before the lie could limp. "Ma," he said, using the old name like a bridge he'd forgotten belonged to both of us. He fussed with my bag, my elbow, the world. His shirt was wrinkled along the spine, where stress holds on. It was his roof for a while, he insisted, just until the knee decided stairs were not mountains. I didn't want to go. I prefer the lullaby of my own clock. Still, I let him steer me across the lawn of his well-kept life. This is what we do for our children. We step into their order and pretend we don't see the price tags hanging from the curtains. His wife opened the door like a flight attendant who hates turbulence. Her name is Portia. After Shakespeare, she'll tell you, though nothing about her reads mercy or wit. Polished hair, polished nails, even her concern looked buffed. "Welcome, Jan," she said, dropping the last syllable of my name, as if it were too heavy for her mouth. The guest room was immaculate beige with a beige opinion of itself. My old-fashioned shawl looked ridiculous over the back of a chair that had never been asked to comfort anyone. It was a museum of taste. I felt like an exhibit. The first days were an arrangement of small humiliations wrapped in kindness. My son made tea and oversugared it the way he did at 12, proud of helping, unaware of the sticky rings left behind. He lifted my leg in both hands the way his father used to lift a wing of the Christmas turkey, carefully, bravely, unsure. He smelled faintly of aftershave and apology. He had meetings and deadlines and screens that bit him back if he looked away. When he left for work, the house belonged to Portia and her round-the-clock performance of control. She moved like a metronome set too fast, wiped a counter that didn't need wiping, straightened the magazines in militant diagonals, spoke to me in italics. "Are we comfortable? Are we taking our meds on time? Do we think we could be neater with the knitting? So many little bits of yarn, Jan." She opened the curtains at exactly 8, as if light were a ritual that required witnesses. I thanked her anyway. Gratitude is a habit that keeps the soul from stiffening. I noticed her hands. A quiet tremor in the waiting spaces between gestures. The way her eyes scanned for an exit in every conversation. She'd vanish into the hallway with her phone cupped like a secret. Return with breath, too quick for walking. My son called it stress. Fundraisers, committees, an auction with a theme she pronounced like salvation. I didn't argue. I have learned arguments only make the truth put on armor. But I made a note. I keep many. Even now, there is always a small pad near my chair, pencil sharpened to a spiteful little spear. I have lived long enough to know that memory, like a dog, obeys better with a firm leash. One night, after a day that tried to bite, she came into my room with a glass of water and the rattling sound of pills against plastic. "You look exhausted," she said brightly. She always sounded bright around the edges, the way a cheap frame tries not to be noticed. "Dr. H said you could take an extra if the pain spikes. You'll sleep deep. No more tossing like a fish." The word extra hovered in the air, like a small black bird. It did not land where it should. Our doctor had never used the word with me. I looked at the pill. This old body has swallowed more medications than a pharmacy shelf, and still my tongue knows the difference between mercy and erasure. I should have said no. I wanted to, but sleep felt like a shore I was drowning toward, and her smile was so practiced, and a part of me, the part that still believes in the simple decency of shared roofs, wanted to be the kind of guest who doesn't make the hostess look bad. I took the water. The plastic sang. The room slid sideways. Not sleep, something heavier. A curtain pinned to my chest. Sound became a hallway too long to cross. In that thick velvet of nothing, a strange coolness brushed my crown, like winter reaching in through a keyhole. Then darkness put its thumb on the back of my head and pressed. When I woke, the lamp wore a little hat of mourning. My mouth had the taste of cotton and secrets. I reached to smooth my hair, the way women do by instinct when we return to ourselves. My hand met fields of stubble. Not hair. Not mine. An animal's beginning of fur. There are moments in a life when the heart understands before the mind will be bothered. I stood and the walker clattered, metal chastising metal. In the mirror, a stranger, my scalp, pale and exposed, a map of every childhood fall I had ever managed to forget. Irregular patches, clumsy buzz, small nicks that had remembered to hurt only now. I would not cry. I told myself that like a commandment, but the first sound that came out of me was not a cry. It was a small, surprised, oh, the kind a person makes when taught that the world still contains a The second sound was a mother's moan, the kind reserved for losses no one knows how to count. Portia entered as if on a cue. Coffee in hand, perfume like expensive fruit. She saw me, and her mouth made a shape I had never seen on anyone decent. There you are, she sang. We needed to clean things up. So much easier for hygiene. Don't you feel fresher? It is a particular kind of violence when someone calls brutality cleanliness. It is also a confession. I called for my son, with a voice I had used twice before in my life, once when his father fainted in a garden, and once when I found a swallow on our porch, dying without any idea how to do it. He came quickly, hair a ruin, eyes still sticky with sleep. He looked from me to the floor, silver strands like shed snake sand, then to the woman he'd promised to protect. The world went quiet except for 3 people breathing wrong. Explain, he whispered. That was mercy. He still thought there was something explainable. Portia did what people like her do when the room fills with facts. She crafted another world, a softer one where I had pulled at my own hair in fever, where she had spared me infection, where extra pills were common sense and not anesthesia. She was so good at it, so smooth, I almost wished to step into the world she'd built just to be warm for a minute. But then I saw his face, my boy watching the space between our stories like a court that can't afford to choose. That hurt more than my scalp. He wanted peace. Oh, my son. Peace isn't free. It costs the truth first. What followed were days lived inside a low, constant hum. Like the sound a refrigerator makes when you're awake at 2 in the morning and every cupboard is full except the one you need. Portia brought me trays and placed them slightly too far for convenience, then apologized in a tone that meant the opposite of every syllable. She introduced me to her friends in the hallway in whispers, as if I were a temporary piece of furniture she'd ordered in the wrong shade. My son hovered on the threshold of my door with apologies he did not know how to cash. He brought tea and awkward hands and avoidance. He was not cruel. He was worse. He was weak. And weakness, when paired with someone else's appetite, is a weapon all its own. You should know this about me. I do not sleep in despair. 1 night of tears, maybe 2, because the body is not made of law. After that, I find a pencil. I begin to collect soft facts. Hard evidence. The difference between mercy and na-vit is documentation. I told him I was forgetting things. It wasn't far from true. Grief is fog that speaks fluent confusion. Could you get me one of those little machines for lectures? I asked, fingers near my temple like an actor remembering a line. A recorder. The doctor says I should keep track. And I'd like to tell you some family stories before they wander off without me. He brightened, because this fit the story he'd been sold about me. The kindly, fading mother who needed help telling her own life. He ordered the device that afternoon. It arrived with a single red button that might as well have been a heartbeat. I practiced. I learned the choreography of my own room so I could stash the machine where it could hear without being seen. I learned how to set the phone I supposedly only used to call my sister to take sharp little photographs in secret. I learned the patience of waiting until the house believed I was napping. When you are old and most people look through you to find themselves, it is astonishing how much you can hear. Portia's calls were daggers she thought she swallowed. Friday, she hissed to someone whose voice was nicotine and gravel. I said, Friday, don't threaten me. I'll get it. She said my name, the way a butcher says bone-in, inconvenience, not the structure that makes anything stand. She left her handbag open on the hall table one afternoon. The way guilty people do when they want to be caught by mercy instead of law. Inside, bottles that didn't belong to her. Names that weren't hers on labels, with doses that whispered danger. I took pictures with a hand that didn't shake. She left the laptop open once, half a page of a gambling website blinking like a red light at a railroad crossing. Bank statements with purchases I knew my son would never have made. Sites with names that pretended to be small but had appetites. The size of countries. Screen. Click, screen, click. The little machine with the red button learned to hold its breath under cushions. It learned to sit on the nightstand and pretend to be innocent while the next room tore itself into strips in the dark. Names like Lorenzo, words like, oh. The kind of laughter a person makes when laughing is the only weapon they still remember how to swing. I wore my confusion like a coat that didn't fit. I misplaced my teacup in the same 2 places. I asked what day it was when I already knew. I knitted the same row twice and pretended surprise when I unknitted it. Performance has never pleased me, but I understood, finally, how women in history have saved their lives by letting a room believe they were smaller than they are. When my evidence had a spine, I invited Backbone into the house, my sister-in-law who is a storm with pearls on, her husband, quiet and watchful. I told my son we would be calm. I promised not to turn the dining room into a courtroom. I meant it. Righteousness without poise looks too much like panic to men who would rather not see. He stood beside me in our beige living museum with his face like a door, deciding whether to lock. When she walked in with shopping bags and perfume like the start of an alibi, he did not go to her. He stayed with me. It is funny what victories look like, after all the speeches you hear about them. I did not accuse. I opened a folder. I pressed play. I let her own voice climb the walls, like ivy, and choke the light. Debt collectors. Promises she could not finance. Lies told with the smoothness of a woman who never learned the difference between an audience and a witness. The photographs of pills with other women's names. The online losses dressed up as fundraisers with themes. My son Reed. I watched knowledge pull his shoulders down like a wet coat. There was a small, human moan inside his throat. The sound a man makes when he knows he cannot go back to the room where things were fine. She threw the usual fire. I expected flames. She called me cunning, called me senile, called me a saboteur in slippers. That last one nearly made me smile. I am many things. I have never been a saboteur. I am an archivist of wrongs. She paced and cried and made the kind of apology that sounds like punishment. She said it was stress. She said it was charity work. She said it was all of us. She never said it was her. And then, because even pride gets tired, she sat. It is a strange mercy when a person runs out of lies within arm's reach of the truth. My son said the word help. Not to me. To her. He said separation next. To protect, to simplify, to breathe. His voice grew up while I watched it. He called a facility that night with his aunt's stern chin in place of his own. Her parents arrived, wet around the eyes with the particular shame of people whose money had been mistaken for character. They took her in a car that used to believe it was invincible. The door closed soft as a confession. It was not a victory so much as a sudden absence of war. I went home as soon as my knee remembered what a staircase is for. The key turned in my lock and the house answered. I have been practicing the sound of you. Dust and lemon oil and a faint whisper of my late husband's aftershave rose the way a faithful dog rises from a nap. I touched the dining table and felt the echo of every meal it had ever hosted. I spoke my name to the room. The syllables landed with the confidence of a bird on a familiar branch. Locks were changed. Numbers too. My son replaced the batteries in smoke detectors and kissed my hair, what was left of it, with a penance too soft to hold on to. He came every day for a while because shame makes people punctual. He took off his suit jacket in my kitchen and rolled up sleeves and listened, really listened, to the catalogue of harm. He said the words I needed once. I'm sorry. He did not try to bargain with them. He let them do their work. We started again from an older place, where the boy who once cried over a broken model airplane learned that some things you do not repair. You set them down and grow around the loss. I watched my scalp like weather. At first it was all horizon, then almost shyly soft regrowth, silver and stubborn as frost. I didn't wear scarves. I didn't cover it to make anyone comfortable. I would not hide another person's cruelty for their reputation's sake. I walked around the block each morning with my head bare to the sun. And neighbors said my name with the careful love people reserve for survivors and pies. I planted tomatoes. The seedlings were holding tiny hands up from the earth like they had questions. I told them, water, patience, the occasional steak. The scholarship fund in my husband's name was an afterthought that turned out to be a beginning. A handful of first to college. First to believe their body and mind were on the same team. First to think they might one day have a porch and a neighbor who returned Tupperware. We said the names aloud in my living room so the house could learn them too. Their letters arrived with commas out of place and gratitude in all the right ones. I underlined the sentences that tasted like resilience. I kept those pages on the refrigerator under the magnet shaped, like a rooster with half his paint gone from years of doing his job. People ask me whether I forgave her. Forgiveness is a word I keep in a deep drawer with birth certificates and guarantees nobody honors. I took it out once, held it up to the window. It was thin in places. It let too much light through. So I put it away. What I use instead is this. I do not carry her. That is enough. I will not strap her to my back and call it virtue. She can walk her own road, bareheaded like me, toward a dawn I do not need to see. As for my son, He comes on Sundays with a paper bag of groceries he pretends I can't afford, and fixes small useful things, a squeaky hinge, the rattle under the sink, because men like to make utilities sound like music. We talk about ordinary miracles, grass, bills paid on time, the way a knee learns to trust a stair again. We watch a game on low volume. He stays for the credits now. He sets down his phone. He looks at me when I speak, and not at a door he might open to escape the truth. Neighbors lean toward me at the mailbox and whisper their own stories. Mother-in-laws without voices. Sisters with husbands who drink their paychecks down to dimes. Daughters who can't stop rescuing men drowning in puddles. We make a circle out of what used to shame us, and the circle holds. Sometimes I think this is how women keep the roof from caving. By handing each other small beams no one else sees the use of until they hold. When summer came, the tomatoes turned scandalously red. A wren built a house in the wreath on my door and scolded me every time I came home, as if I had invented intrusion. I let her. The wind chime my granddaughter made from spoons found its note, and I began to sleep with the window cracked so the night could come in and prove it was just dark, not dangerous. What remains? A head that is mine in every inch of its stubborn growth. A son who learned the difference between peace and silence. A house that knows my footsteps without having to look. Letters from kids who end their paragraphs with hope, like a punctuation mark nobody taught them but they understood anyway. And a truth that fits in the mouth without crowding the tongue. Control is not care. Love without respect is just weather. A name is a house. Keep the key. Sometimes, standing at the sink in the last light of day. The faucet singing soft metal lullabies. I see my reflection, this woman with new hair and old eyes, and think of how close I came to believing I was temporary. I touch the glass where my crown is still shorter than it should be, and I bless it, not because of what she did, but because of who I am now that I am no longer afraid of mirrors. Tonight, the kettle will hum its small hymn, the street will settle into its slippers. I will write 3 lines in a blue notebook, what I noticed, what I learned, what I refuse. Then I will speak my name softly to the room, so the room can speak it back to me in the morning. If the past comes knocking, it can wait on the porch. Let the night hold it. I have earned my sleep. And if you are listening from some distance, the way we listen to the ocean in a shell, believing we hear more than we do, take this with you and fold it into your own pocket. When someone calls your life messy and offers you scissors, ask to see their hands. When someone says you don't need to worry anymore, worry just enough to ask for the papers. When someone tells you love requires you to be smaller, grow. The house is quiet now, but it hums. The hum is mine. The wind moves through the hedges with a sound like pages turning. Somewhere a train confesses it is leaving again. Somewhere, a young woman I will never meet reads her acceptance letter and laughs out loud in a kitchen that has been waiting years to hear it. I turn off the lamp. The dark arrives like a friend who knows every hallway. I lie down, and the pillow receives the soft rasp of new hair. And I smile because the last thing I feel before sleep is the proof of myself. I do not whisper it. I do not need to. I am here. I am whole. I am not theirs. Spring came in slow increments, as if the trees were shy about being seen green again. I could tell the month by the tomatoes' mood and the way the birds practiced their mornings. I moved through the house like a woman learning the choreography of a familiar song she'd once forgotten. Open the blinds. Kiss the frame of David's photograph with 2 fingers. Set the kettle. Breathe. My hair found its courage strand by strand. I stopped counting. I let it surprise me in mirrors I didn't rush past. On a Tuesday with butter yellow light, a letter arrived in an envelope that wanted to be brave. My name in a careful hand, the way schoolchildren write when they have decided to be excellent. It was from the facility. Portion no longer a storm, not yet weathered, had asked if I would meet with her and a counselor. Family session, the letter said. As if you could put that phrase on a plate and pass it around without someone dropping it. I stood at the sink with the letter in the window and listened for my fear. It knocked politely. I told it to wait on the porch while I put on my shoes. The counselor's room had shelves of books that meant well, and 2 chairs that liked people who were honest. Portia sat small, a bird that had been told the sky was her enemy. There were no nails, no polished anger, only a woman who'd lost her costume and did not know where to look for skin. Janice, she said, my full name like a plea. I sat, folded my hands the way my mother taught me when the world is watching. She talked, not the slick sentences of a person performing repentance, but a clumsy stack of phrases that bumped into each other and said sorry for the bruises. Pills became nights. Nights became debts. Debts became a door she opened to a room labeled escape that locked behind her. She never once used the word choice as a shield. She never once asked me to hold a piece of her shame so it would weigh less. She said, I hurt you, and let it stand there like a witness. I did not hand her forgiveness like a towel. I told her my scalp remembered the temperature of air. I told her how silence sounds when your son believes a softer lie because it lets him sleep. I told her about the tomatoes, because life goes on, and sometimes that is the hardest part. The counselor nodded and took notes as if collecting rain. May I say something that isn't asking for anything? Portia's voice trembled the way electricity does before lights fail. I said yes because women in rooms like this have said yes to worse. I thought control would keep me from drowning. I didn't understand the difference between saving someone and holding them under so they stop struggling. She looked at my hair and cried, the quiet kind, the kind that apologizes for existing. I have no right to ask you to see me differently. I just wanted you to know, I see me differently. Outside afterward, the air felt scrubbed. I did not feel lighter. I felt more situated inside my bones. Mercy is not a river I let anyone swim in, but I can stand near it without pushing heads under. I walked past the ornamental fountain in the facility garden, the one that pretends it's a real spring, and sat on a bench that looked like it had practiced listening. A nurse on break laughed into her phone with relief. A man with a tremor tossed crumbs to a sparrow that forgave his aim. The world, indifferent and kind, continued. I said no to lunch with Portia. I was not hungry in a way food satisfies, but I wrote my name and a sentence on a small card and asked the counselor to give it to her. I will not be your jailer. I am not your home. Heal anyway. On the bus home, a child in a superhero shirt offered me a sticker and I wore it on my wrist until the glue gave up. Sometimes you accept what is offered because it reminds the day how to be simple. Letters from the scholarship. Students grew into a small chorus on my fridge. One of them, Leela, wrote about a lab where she learned to measure patience by the drop. Another, Casey, sent a photograph of a campus bench where they realized loneliness could sit beside purpose without a fight breaking out. I underlined their words and felt my house swell a little. Like bread remembering yeast, Michael started showing up with groceries I didn't need and questions I did. How did you know? He asked one afternoon, sitting at the table with a humility that had finally learned not to wear cologne. About the lies. About what to do. I stirred sugar into my tea and listened to the spoon sing against ceramic. I watched, I said. I believed what I saw more than what I wanted. He nodded as if the sentence had taken him somewhere he'd been trying to name. He brought me a small lemon tree in a clay pot. For the kitchen, he said. A factory for beginnings. We laughed. Because we needed a word less heavy than redemption. A rumor started up in the neighborhood that I was giving classes in the church basement on how not to be eaten alive while being polite. It wasn't my idea. It was Evelyn's, my late spring friend with the cabbage theology. 3 evenings, she said. Stories, and tea. No lecterns. Chairs in a circle. A bell, when people talk too long. The first night, 12 women arrived with cookies that were really confessions. We didn't solve anything. We handed each other small tools. A phrase that closes doors without slamming them. A way to ask for paperwork without sounding paranoid. The courage to say, I need that in writing, with a smile that doesn't apologize. On the last night, I read a letter from one of the scholarship students and no one pretended they weren't crying. We put the bell away. We didn't need it anymore. Late summer brought a hearing for debts that weren't mine. Paperwork has a way of reappearing like weeds that think they're perennials. I wore my good cardigan and a brooch the size of my conviction. Portia's lawyer tried to be slippery, then realized oil doesn't work in rooms built for light. My son spoke without shaking. Portia sat with her hands folded like contrition and said only what the judge asked her to say. When it was my turn, I rested my fingers on the edge of the table, 2 inches from the place where Portia's fingers were. Your Honor, I said, I am not here to discuss love. I am here to discuss facts. The judge's eyes warmed a fraction. We all did our small jobs. The gavel fell like a period, not an exclamation. On the walk home from the bus stop, the afternoon smelled like hot coins and basil. I cut through the park and sat on the low wall by the fountain the city can barely afford to maintain. A girl practiced backbends on the grass while her father filmed and tried not to direct. People say time heals. I think time hands you a box of bandages and sits down. You do the rest while it watches the sky. Asterisk, I received a letter with no return address. Not Michael's handwriting. Not a stranger's. Inside, a short apology written in sentences that didn't audition for awards. It asked for nothing. It named what was done. It wished me sleep. I put it in the drawer with my birth certificate, and the first Mother's Day card my son ever drew, a stick figure with hair like rays and a caption that simply said, Light. I didn't answer. Some apologies are complete without echoes. Hair is patient. It doesn't negotiate. It does what it is made to do in the quiet. By autumn, my crown had become a small, silver meadow. Children in the neighborhood asked if I cut it like that on purpose. On purpose is a powerful spell, I told them. Use it when you can. On a breezy Wednesday, I went to the barber shop on Elm with a picture of myself from 5 years ago and a note for the mirror. Be kind. The barber, a woman with forearms like promises, said, "You want shape." I said I wanted a decision. She spun the chair, combed, snipped, translated. When she finished, I touched the back of my head and felt normal bloom. I tipped too much and didn't apologize. One evening, during the hour when windows become televisions and everyone's lives are on low volume, there was a knock at my door. Not urgent, not timid, a knock that had learned manners. Portia, smaller, plainer, the kind of plain you only earn by putting down the costume and keeping it down even when no one is watching. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me because boundaries make conversation honest. The kettle clicks off. Steam curls into the quiet like a sigh that's been waiting its turn. I pour 1 cup. Just one, and that's enough now. Outside, the evening folds over my little house like a worn blanket. The lemon tree glows faintly in the porch light, brave and small. In the window's reflection, I see a woman I almost lost, but she's looking back, steady, certain, silver-crowned and free. I think of all the noise that used to live here, the lies, the pleading, the fear, the endless explanations. Now there's only the hum of peace, and the sound of my own breathing, soft and sure. Like a promise kept. They took my hair once, but not my story. They bruised my heart, but not my will. And though the world spins on, careless as ever, I have found my stillness in its turning. So when people ask how it ended, I tell them, it didn't. It simply quieted, and in that quiet, I began again. The house exhales, the night settles, and for the first time in a long, long while, I am home.